Okay, I'm actually going to start this chapter already because it's a longish chapter, longer than the previous chapters. And before I actually begin the chapter, I would just like to say that I'm dedicating this class to the Aliyah of the Neshama of my grandmother, whose yahrzeit is today. Her name is Rachaleah Bas Michal. Her Neshama should have an Aliyah, and she should be a Gutta Eisbetter for the family. That's an expression in Yiddish. She should intercede on high in a good way for the family, for all their needs, and especially for Klal Yisrael, for peace in Eretz Yisrael, for the release of the hostages, and for Mashiach to come now. Okay, we are going to be beginning chapter 7 of Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah. Chapter 7 is actually a pivotal chapter in Shaar Hayichud v'Emunah because it really deals with the concept, it really defines in this chapter what is meant when we say Yichud Hashem, the unity of Hashem. In other words, there is nothing else besides Hashem. And in fact, the Alter Rebbe explains what we alluded to in the very beginning of this book of Tanya, that there is a difference between what we call Yichud Ilah, superior unity of Hashem, and Yichud Tata, inferior unity of Hashem, or lower level unity of Hashem. And we will see how that actually is defined by the Alter Rebbe. It doesn't mean any multiplicity, but that Hashem, there's something from Hashem's perspective, unity of Hashem from Hashem's perspective, and unity of Hashem from our perspective. That is the basic meaning. But before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of that, let us recap a little bit of what was said at the end of last chapter. The end of last chapter, the Alter Rebbe started speaking about the fact that the relationship between the Creator and creation cannot be compared to the relationship between body and soul. People can erroneously think that there is a comparison, but in fact, there are vast differences between the relationship between the body and soul and Creator and creation, although we might think it's similar. Why do we think it's similar? Because the soul, the neshama, gives life to the body. But although the neshama does give life to the body, the neshama does not create the body. That's one major difference. And another difference, which now we're going to discuss, is that the neshama doesn't actually give life to anything else besides the body. The neshama only gives life to that particular body. And so therefore, we have to conclude that there is something unique about the body to receive this light, and the body is therefore a participant in its own life. In other words, the neshama needs the body, and we cannot say that the body is non-existent. We might be able to say that the body is insignificant, but we cannot say that the body is non-existent towards the soul. When we talk about the world, we cannot say the same thing about the world. We cannot say that the world has something compatible to its creator and therefore has some significance to Hashem, and it is why Hashem chose the world, right? In other words, because the world is compatible, so Hashem chose the world to shine his light. No. Hashem is Ein Oid. There is no secondary existence to Hashem. And from Hashem's perspective, there is nothing, because Hashem created the world out of nothingness. So now we begin framing the concept of Yichud Hashem, unity of Hashem, in two ways. The Alter Rebbe begins by saying that Yichud Hashem, Yichud Ilah, the higher level of unity of Hashem, is represented by the verse Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And lower level unity of Hashem, Yichud Tata, is represented by the verse Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusay L'Olam Va'ed. I'm just going to ask you to give me 1 second. Sorry about that. We have some little people at home. School vacation. Okay, so again, superior unity of Hashem is represented by the verse Shema Yisrael, which we say daily, and unity of Hashem from our perspective, Yichud Tata'a, is represented by the verse that we say immediately after Shema Yisrael, which is Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusay L'Olam Va'ed, which I'm not going to go into the details that the Alter Rebbe specifies, but the word Va'ed at the end of the second pasuk correlates to the number Echad, so it also represents the unity by different switching the letters and different formulas that are used. Okay, now we know that there are these two types of unity of Hashem represented. Before we actually get into what is unity of Hashem from Hashem's perspective, what is unity of Hashem from our perspective, we have to ask the question, what is the purpose of Tzimtzum? In other words, what is the purpose of the world appearing to be separate and independent from Hashem? The answer that the Alter Rebbe gives in this chapter of Tanya is in order for Hashem to be revealed. That is our purpose. That is the purpose of creation. The reason that the world appears to be independent is for us to reveal its utter dependence on its creator. Ein melech b'loi am. Hashem is a king, but you cannot have a king without a nation. This is a pasuk from our sages. Ein melech b'loi am. There is no king without a nation. It doesn't help for Hashem to sit on his lofty throne and have no one to rule. The word am, nation, right? Am Yisrael, nation of Israel, comes from the word omimut, which means dim, weak, concealed. The people over whom Hashem rules have to be distant from him. Hashem, a king, cannot rule over his children. He's not considered a king over his children. He's considered a father. It is true that Hashem is also a father, and we'll get to that later on. But for now, we are talking about Hashem's role as a king. A king cannot rule over his children, nor can he rule over his ministers, because his ministers are close. They are part of his inner circle, so they are close to him. He can rule over his subjects. Who are his subjects? Who are a king's subjects? Those people who appear not to have any sort of relationship with the king. There's a king who rules over them, and they are the subjects who go along their lives. They don't appear to have a relationship, but those are the people over whom the king rules. So when we say that Hashem rules over the nation of Israel, right? Adon Olam, we're going to be talking about the word Olam soon as well, and the word Adon, actually the master. But when we say Ein Melech B'loi Am, there is no king without a nation, this nation appears to be very distant from its ruler. The name of Hashem that expresses royalty is called Adnus. You know how we say in a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu. We don't say Hashem, we say the name of Hashem, Ado, and then the end of the word is Nai. I'm not pronouncing it because we're not allowed to pronounce it, but we're going to refer to it over here as Adnut. The name of Hashem, which refers to this word. This is the name of Hashem, which refers to Hashem being a king, because he is Adon Kol Ha'olam. He is the master and ruler over the entire world. This aspect of royalty maintains the world as separate, at least in appearance, because otherwise it would go back to its source and not be considered an olam. Now, olam actually comes from the word from the word Helem. Helem means concealment. So Hashem is Adon, that's the name of Hashem. Kol Ha'olam, he is the master of the world which is concealed. We are distant, at least we appear to be distant, because that is how Hashem is king. This is actually expressed through the last of the 10 attributes, the 10 spheros of Hashem, Malchus, the sphere of royalty. The world was actually created when Hashem filtered his life, or the creation of the world went through the process of tzimtzum. It means that the light and life of Hashem went through kind of a filtering process through every single one of the 10 attributes until it reached the last attribute, the last sphere of Malchus, with which the world was created. So Malchus is actually the sphere, the attribute. Royalty is the attribute of Hashem, which created the world. What is a world? A world is governed by time and space. Time meaning there is yesterday, today, and tomorrow, past, present, and future. Space meaning there's 4 directions or more. And it was created through Malchus, through royalty, how was it created through Malchus? Through the word of Hashem. Now, word of Hashem refers to speech. If a person lives in isolation, he doesn't need to speak. Speech is for others. Speech reveals the thoughts of the person who is speaking. So this level of Malchus, which created the world through speech, is for the nation, which appear to be distant, for the world, which appears to be distant. Now, this is a limitation, actually, when we say that Hashem created the world through speech, through contracting himself, through hiding the revelation of his life. Remember that we're not going to say, and we're going to explain more in this chapter, we're not saying there's less of Hashem, but that there is less of Hashem revealed. Okay, through the level of Malchus, the world came into being and appears distant because of this smaller amount of revelation, right? These limitations do not exist in the higher spheres. In the first 9 attributes, these limitations of time and space don't exist. Only in the level of Malchus, royalty, does the definitions and limitations of the world exist. What do we say? We say Hashem melech, Hashem malach, Hashem yimlech la'olam va'ed. Hashem rules, Hashem ruled, and Hashem will rule, past, present, and future, which is a limitation connected to the world, which is also limited. But here is the beautiful concept we learn in this chapter. Malchus, although it is limited and creates limitation, and by the way, limitation creates existence, because we only exist because of this limitation, Malchus is still connected to all the other spheres which come from above, from Or Ein Sof, from the unlimited, infinite light of Hashem, above time and space. So again, although Malchus is within time and space, this aspect of royalty of Hashem, which is limited, creating the world, it's connected with the part of Hashem, which is above time and space. And therefore, from the perspective of Hashem, time and space doesn't exist. Time and space is nothing. It is where the name Havaya dominates. Remember, we said last chapter, Hashem or Elohim, that there's a level of Hashem on the name of Havaya, which is unlimited, creative force of creation, which then has a shield in order to create the world. Havaya, the name of Hashem, Havaya, is above time and space. And it connects with Adnut. It connects with the aspect of Hashem, which is royalty, to create the world. But above the level of Malchus, the name Havaya is dominant. And Havaya has no limits, because in the same ways we say that Malchus is Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch, past, present, and future. The name Havaya is Haya, Hoive, V'yihye Ke'echad, past, present, and future as one. There is no limitations of time and space in the higher levels of the Sfirot. And that is what we refer to when we say Yichud Ilah, superior unity of Hashem. When the name of Havaya is dominant, and it is, and the level of Malchus is absorbed into the higher spheres. The opposite becomes true when Malchus is dominant, or the name of Adnut, of royalty, of the master of the world, that becomes dominant, and Havaya is absorbed. In other words, there's two directions that it flows. When the name of Hashem, Havaya, infinite, no limits, connected to Ein Sof without any limitations, is dominant, that is from the perspective of Hashem, and that is Yichud Ilah. When the name of Adnut is dominant through the sphere of Malchus, that is how we see the world, and that is when Malchus is dominant and Havaya is absorbed within Malchus. I know it's difficult to understand. In fact, the Alter Rebbe even says we cannot understand it. Like, we can know that this is true, but we cannot understand how. Now, let's further explain what it means, what Yichud Tatoa means. In other words, what the unity of Hashem from our perspective, what does that mean? Hashem doesn't see the world, but we do. However, and this is gold. However, we are aware through learning, etc. We are aware that time and space does not have an independent existence, and therefore this awareness enables us to relinquish our personal desires before Hashem. At the same time, feeling our desires. We feel our desires because we exist from our perspective. But because we are aware that we are not independent, although it appears so, we relinquish this independence. And we say we are one with Hashem, and therefore we fulfill the will of Hashem, which are Torah and mitzvahs. We know that although Hashem is higher than time and space, he is present within time and space because he is one with the attribute of Malchus. And that's the whole connection. Malchus creates the world, and it appears very limited, but we have to remember that the spheres have a relationship with each other, and therefore the very highest sphere is contained within the lowest level sphere, and therefore Malchus is one with Hashem on a level that is beyond time and space. Tzimtzum, Hashem, who is Ein Sof, he is unlimited, endlessly fills the world in time, space, the heavens above, the earth below, no limitations, equally. We have to remember that Tzimtzum does not mean that the presence of Hashem is withheld. We are not saying that there's a finite amount of Hashem within finite creations. But what are we saying? That there is an infinite amount of Hashem in finite creations, this is faith. This is beyond logical understanding, because this does not make sense according to logic. You cannot fit something bigger into something smaller. And yet we say that because of Tzimtzum, because of the process of Tzimtzum, we are able, Hashem, the infinite Hashem, an infinite amount of Hashem can fit into finite creations. Only we don't feel it. The created being doesn't feel it because of Tzimtzum. We can understand it, but not how it works. So just to give an added dimension, Hashem is not like a human being. Hashem doesn't change because of creation. You know, when you work hard and you put together something, whether it's a class or a cake or an event or whatever it is, right? You prepare for Shabbos, you get tired. You get tired. When you learn something, you have like an added dimension to you now. Like yesterday, you didn't know this concept. Today, you know this concept. So you've changed because you haven't, it's added to your being. In Hashem, a human being acquires knowledge, but Hashem doesn't change because of creation, because Hashem is the knowledge. In other words, creation of the world does not affect Hashem in any way. And that's why the Alter Rebbe explains it to us in this chapter, that we can understand the mistake of some scholars in the past who based their understanding on a commentary of the Arizal mistakenly. They understood it in a mistaken way, so says the Alter Rebbe. They understood Tzimtzum to be literal, meaning that Hashem removed himself from this world. In other words, no one ever negated that Hashem controls the world, but that Hashem supervises the world. In other words, if Tzimtzum means that Hashem removed himself physically, that means Hashem is controlling the world, but from a distance. He's like delegating, supervising from a distance, not within the world. But the Alter Rebbe says we cannot apply Tzimtzum literally, because if we were to apply Tzimtzum literally, it would be assigning physical characteristics to Hashem. We are saying that Hashem is limiting himself. Well, Hashem is beyond limitation. A human being can limit themselves, but Hashem is not limited. Hashem does not limit himself. He is revealed less, but he is not supervising the world from afar. He is within creation. Hashem is in everything, but we cannot grasp Hashem, even superior beings. Now let's discuss this word, grasp Hashem. Literally, it means we can't hold Hashem, right? Or we can't understand Hashem. Let's say your mind, right? Your mind, when it's thinking, when it thinks about something, correct? When you think about your house, you could travel all over the world and still think about your house. That house exists in your mind, but not the actual house, the vision of the house, the image of the house. You could think of an animal. The animal doesn't exist. The image of the animal is in your mind. Your mind grasps the image, correct? But it doesn't actually exist. So when we say that Hashem is soivev kol almin, Hashem surrounds the world, we can mistakenly think, and I know I've made this mistake, we can mistakenly think that, oh yeah, this high level of Hashem surrounds the world, but is not in the world. So it's actually not true. There are two levels. We always say that there are two levels of how Hashem relates to the world. One is called Sovev Kol Almin, Hashem surrounds, encompasses the world, and one is called Memale Kol Almin, Hashem fills the world. And now the Alter Rebbe turns it on its head and says, just because we say that Hashem encompasses the world, you may think that it's like a human being thinking about an object, that you surround the object with your mind, you surround the image with your mind, but you're not actually together with that image. But in Hashem, it's different. When Hashem surrounds the image, when Hashem thinks about the image, when Hashem encompasses the image, this is actually Hashem creating the image, and this creative force is equal for every single creation, which is why it is considered to be encompassing in an equal manner all creation. But it doesn't mean that it's outside creation. It means that it's within creation, the infinite Hashem, within an equal manner. When we then say that Hashem is Mamale Kol Almin, what's the difference? He's within creation. He fills creation. We say that this is more specific. This light of Hashem is specific to each creation and each function of creation. So an arm has a different light of Hashem than a foot. An ear has a different light of Hashem than an eye. An animal has a different light of Hashem than a human being, for example, according to the level of Hashem filling creation. Memale kol almin. But when we say that Hashem surrounds creation, Hashem grasps creation, that actually means, different to a human being, that Hashem is within creation equally. It's a beautiful concept. I could repeat it if you want. It's very lofty concept. And it shows us that Hashem is not far. Hashem is here, present, infinitely present, the infinite Hashem. Hashem is in everything, but we, because of Tzimtzum, Hashem grasps us, but we cannot grasp Hashem. Even superior beings cannot grasp Hashem. What does that mean? We cannot understand Hashem. We are not comparable to Hashem. Hashem encompasses each creation equally. Hashem's knowledge is actually the creation's existence, not like a human being who, when thinking about something, it's imaginary. By Hashem, it's real. The end of the chapter, interestingly, the end of the chapter goes into a subject which the Alter Rebbe delves into a little bit more deeply in the last chapter of Shaar Hayichud Ve'emunah, but I will mention it briefly here because the Alter Rebbe does briefly mention it at the end of this chapter, that Hashem created the world with this concept of Malchus, which we have to remember that although it seems that it was limited through the power of speech, it's actually connected to the infinite Ein Sof, etc. But what he did was he limited the amount coming from his mouth. In other words, every creation has a different amount of life and light. He limited the amount of chayas coming from ruach piv, from the spirit of his mouth, and enclosed his creative powers within the 10 utterances, the asara mamaris, with which he created the world. Now, these asara mamaris, you can think to yourself, well, how did Hashem create absolutely everything in this world using 10 statements? Like, there are many, 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 many more creations in the world than what was said in these 10 statements. And just to give you an example, the 10 statements referred to are what we read about in Bereshis, and when Hashem created the world. Yehi ar, let there be light, one statement. Yehi rakia, let there be a firmament, another statement, etc. How was everything in creation created based on these 10 statements? Because actually the words in these 10 statements can then be changed according to different formulas and permutations, and even gematria, numerical value, which is the very lowest level of creation, including, the Alter Rebbe even mentions in this chapter, including a stone, which a stone is called even. Even those letters originate from the 10 utterances through different formulas. And what happens is that this diminished amount of life is then called or considered the soul, even of the inorganic. Even inorganic material has a soul, what's the function of the soul? This soul keeps it in existence, created and constantly creates even the most minute inorganic substance in the world. And therefore, there is not less of Hashem in every creation, but there is less revealed according to every single creation's level. And interestingly enough, the Alter Rebbe then takes this concept in the very last chapter, chapter 12 of Shaar Hayichud Ve'emunah, and goes into further detail, which is why he just mentions it briefly. The reason being is because we have just understood how Hashem creates the world through Malchus, just to recap, which is royalty. For royalty, there needs to be a distance. We are reminded, however, that even though there appears to be a distance, Malchus is connected with a very, very highest Svira in Atzilus, which is very connected to the Ein Sof, infinity of Hashem, and therefore we can conclude that although we appear to exist and we appear to be independent to our eyes, when we become aware through learning, we then realize that actually ein oid milvadoi, because from the perspective of Hashem, there is no time and space. Nothing exists. Okay, I hope that I was able to do this chapter justice. It's one of the most pivotal chapters in Tanya, in Shaar Hayichud. Again, it's a very long parak, and I tried to summarize it. If there are any questions, we can discuss further.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.